Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Two Dads, One Car where we talk about modern fatherhood. I'm excited to bring my friend into the car. His name's Kevin. I've always wanted to bring him on. I've teased the idea when I saw him in January and I said, hey buddy, I'm coming back to Toronto. You gotta come in the car with me and chat about fatherhood. We're tracking a very similar journey. He has a son roughly the same age as my daughter, 3.5, turning 4. And love to get his perspective, also from the legal industry, very similar journeys, and just love to rift and kind of learn more and dig a little deeper. He's such a personable guy too, and so I can't wait to share this conversation and just learn about his perspectives about fatherhood. And so hang tight, he is just around the corner. I'm gonna go pick him up very shortly. All right, chat soon. Well, let's jump in, Kevin. I did a brief introduction to you earlier, but why don't you give us a snapshot of your family, number of kids, rough ages, and we'll just kick it off from there.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess first thing to start, I'm in my mid-30s, and I got married approximately 5 years ago. And I currently have one son who is 3.5 years old. He's still in preschool and in daycare, and we are open to having a second kid. Hasn't happened just yet. But it's one of those things where, life kind of gets in the way, work gets in the way, but at the same time, you only have so much time to raise a family and start, and have kids and keep them close together. So it's something that we're open to.
One of the things that, thanks for that, and one of the things that I'm excited about talking with you on this car is that we're tracking such a similar journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and I follow this very similar path, going into big law firm, in-house. I think our kids are roughly the same age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's that whole framework. And so for me, I just I just want to sit down and dive into this, Kevin. You are in different cities, so I find this to be such a fun opportunity. One question I often like to ask the guests is to you, what is the unspoken truth about fatherhood? Mm-hmm. Something that's not shared as widely, you kind of wish was more given more light for you. What comes up that's unspoken?
My answer is focused on millennial parenting.
Let's do it.
And I would say that an unspoken truth is that millennials are sort of at the forefront of this dramatic new era of parenting, which is significantly different from, I'd say, previous generations. I don't mean to generalize, but I see it in the way that, especially for men, how much more involved we are as parents, how much more we want to be involved, right? It's not just a matter of our duty or responsibility. You see dads who want to do daycare pickups and drop-offs, who want to do classes with their kid and just their kid, right? And who want to do all these things that I would say traditionally a lot of our dads, and I love my dad. My dad was a great dad, and I'm sure you can say the same, but a lot of things that men maybe didn't do before or didn't even consider to be within their scope of responsibilities. But now we see that men are very much involved. And at the same time, though, it's not like things are all great. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty as to, are we doing enough? Are we doing it the right way? Are we doing it the way that our spouses, who typically are women, want it to be done? And is it actually helpful for them? And of course, there's still the challenges of, do you work in certain industries, or do you have certain life challenges where you can't get as involved as you want to be, or you don't think it's appropriate, to do that, right? Speaking about big law and law firms, from what I've heard is that, yes, maybe parental leave is officially offered to all employees of the firm, but a lot of men still don't feel comfortable taking that, right? So there are a lot of hidden challenges or different ways of doing things that may not be, it may not get us all the way there. So I think we're still at the forefront. I'm hoping that for the next generation of parents that, all of these issues that we're going through will be ironed out, and that we can fully transition to this modern era of more equal and equitable parenting.
You kind of nailed it. I think this is exactly it, right? It is. I echo that, everything you said there. It is a completely different approach, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think everything from the gender dynamics, the way the economy's set up, it's whatever was in place before doesn't really translate now, right? And you're right, we are at the forefront where you actually do want to get involved, right?
Yeah.
We're actually talking about this, but then you're faced with these systems, right? That are much more conservative, and you kind of touched upon, parental leave, right? That's very much the case, right? There is a bit of a stigma behind taking it off. taking that time off. And like, you know, what are some other like challenges or things that you've identified and have seen like in your journey? Like, so for example, I mean, if like for me, like one of the things I identified right from the beginning is that there's this whole concept like mommy and me play dates. I'm like, wait a second here. Right? Like, I don't know. Or do you feel that too? Oh, yeah.
It's that's, I mean, you know, I you know, at least for my spouse and I, right? I'd say in many ways we do tend to fall back on a lot of, you know, gender norms or gender stereotypes as well. You know, like I'm definitely the type of dad, and I kind of always have been, who's sort of more like short-term thinking. You know, like if a kid's upset or crying, then you kind of find ways to solve that in the moment. Not to say you necessarily spoil them, but you know what I mean. And I find that for my spouse, you know, she's very much a long-term thinker. Like she's thinking 5 steps ahead. Like not just in the moment. Like what do you have to do today? But how does what we do today affect us a week from now, a month from now, or you know, how are we setting ourselves up for long-term success? And when I, you know, when we're talking about like say like mommy and me play dates and things like that, for guys, at least for me, it seemed like, you know, it's kind of like, oh well, I don't know what we're gonna do today. We'll figure it out, right? And that's not really. I'm not sure if that's really the right way to do it, but that's the way we do things because it always works out in the end and that's sort of how we think about it, right? Like things will always work out in the end, right? And we kind of like make it work, at least in the short run. So I think there's like, I'm not really sure if we necessarily need to have, you know, daddy and me kind of play dates, right? But I think there's definitely ways to sort of foster more bonding time, you know, between a dad and their child, in a way that I guess more men can resonate with.
Yeah, because I think it's ways to, because I feel that there is a desire, right, for other dads who want to be involved, right, in a way that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
In a way that it's like, yeah, this makes sense to you. Like you're seeing that with, you know, for example, like I'm part of this run club. I'm not that fast of a runner, but there's always these dads who have their kids in the strollers and running with them, and they're so fast.
Yeah.
But it's like impressive, right?
Yeah,
like it's like.
And I wonder if for a lot of men, and myself included, you know, are we trying to foster interests in our children that are the same as ours? Are we basically trying to make them like what we do, so that and that's how we bond over them, right? Think of all the times that maybe you might have played sports with your dad. You know, if he really liked hockey, right? Maybe he played a lot of hockey with you in the backyard of the street or whatever, right? Or like if you liked watching F1 together because he liked it, right? Like things like that, where like say for now, like my kid thankfully is obsessed with cars. Yeah. And so am I. Like I love cars. Nice. I can talk about cars all day long. I wish we were talking about cars right now.
We're doing a 2 dads 1 car. We can riff on cars in a bit.
So you know, so a lot of it is you know, is it truly my son's own interest, or is it something that I subconsciously or deliberately fostered on him? Right, and so all this to say, you know, I think there are a lot of ways for dads to connect with their children beyond just like the hobbies, right? And I'm talking more about like actual parenting bonding, and I think a lot of it comes, you know, if we can go back to parental leave for a moment, because for me that is very a topic that I'm very invested in. Yeah. I think that every man, every father should go through an extended period of parental leave, where it's like just you and your child, because only then will you truly understand what it takes to survive the day-to-day challenges of being a parent. And that's something that pretty much every mother has had to go through, at least for a certain period of time, because just in terms of like the immediate needs of the child, right? There's a lot of things that like only a mom can really do. And frankly, you know, guys will never truly understand what it's like to be a mother. But I think when you do extended parental leave, you know, when your spouse, when the mom is fully out of the picture because she's back to work or she's doing her own thing, that's when, you know, and basically there's no safety net, right, for the father. That's when you really learn what it takes. And I feel like that really changes your perspective on parenting, not just for men, but also for women, and sort of like how we can support moms better, right? Because I think a lot of it comes down to, you know, if you want to be an equal parent, if you want to be involved, you really have to understand what your partner is going through as well.
It's really interesting, Kevin, and this idea that you talked about extended parental leave, was it something that you went through, or something that you kind of wish you did, or like just walked through?
So I had the privilege of a 4-month essentially fully topped up parental leave.
Incredible.
Back when I was in the public sector.
Incredible.
And it's something that I really cherish. It's something that I was really looking forward to, and something that I really still love and think back fondly on to this day. It does help that I also had my child during the period when he was just really awakening and seeing the world. So I had him from about 6 months to 10 months. I actually took 4 months of paid parental leave and took an additional month of unpaid leave.
Wow.
I had the privilege of doing that. And so 5 months of leave during the peak period of an infant, when they're the most joyful, like they're easiest in the sense of, they don't have opinions yet, they can't really walk yet, so they're not much of a physical liability, and they just kind of do, they go with you and they're just happy to be with you and to explore the world around them, right? So I had the best part of an infant, and it's it's a once in a lifetime experience, right? Like I love my son now, I love spending every moment with him now, but it's still not the same. Like him as a 3-year-old now is not the same as him as a 6 or 7 month old. And I'll never have that again, right? So I if possible, I do strongly encourage that all men take this time, because it'll go by in the blink of an eye and you'll never get it again.
That's really unique in a great way, Kevin, and I'm so glad you're sharing this, because I don't think I've actually met anybody on the podcast or beyond that's had that depth of opportunity to do that. And I think you're right, though, right? Because it gives you that other perspective, and you kind of build that bond right from the get-go, right? Because it's very simple to, you jump back into work, and different circumstances, right? We're not here to judge, right? But if you have that opportunity to, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes also from, we talk about this opportunity, right? Like there aren't many employers who do offer this opportunity.
Yeah.
And how do we change that? And
yes,
the reality is that, going back to sort of these challenges that millennials are still facing, the reality is that the people in management, people in power who have the authority to really change the culture, they're the ones who likely have kids who are university or otherwise adults, that the sort of level, who don't quite understand what it's like to be a parent today, and who maybe didn't even need to go through the same struggles that we did, right? Like the reality is that the cost of living is a lot higher than it was before. I grew up with the benefit of my mom choosing to be a stay-at-home mom, because my dad's union job was good enough to have a nice house over our heads and have us live not lavishly but comfortably enough, right? That my mom could spend a lot of time with me. And the reality today is that that's not the case. And also, like, regardless of whether it's the case, a lot of people choose to advance their careers because they work so hard for it, and they deserve to, right? So I'm in this, I would say, unique position where my wife is like 10 times better, more ambitious, smarter than me. So her career is going way farther than mine, and she's the one who's in private practice and has to grind and work hard and go through all the challenges that I would say we've seen men traditionally go through.
Yeah.
So I have the benefit of having a little more flexibility in my schedule. Like, I'm still busy at work, but if there's a call from daycare and a pickup, or you have to go to a doctor's appointment, I'm the one who gets to do that.
Yeah.
And again, like, these are things that you can only learn once, like, to be a parent and deal with the day-to-day, by going through it, right? You can't read about it, you can hear from someone else, but you'll never truly know what it's like until you do it. And now that I've gone through it, I understand, okay, this is actually what a lot of parents, predominantly women, have to go through, maybe not by choice. So how do we change the culture so that there's more flexibility, that dads can also take that time if they need, or if they want to take their kids to appointments, or to do things with their kids that may be during work hours or may conflict with work commitments or career sort of advancement.
Yeah, I think what you talked about is you're right. This is a newer kind of setup, and it reminds me of a past podcast episode I did with Alex Su. Actually, he was talking about his wife is like, I think a pediatric surgeon. So even though he's a lawyer, like she is like 3x income, right? So he's like the dynamic's different, right? But for him, he was trying to navigate, he had this preconceived notion based on his parents and before what that looks like, and he's had to make that shift, right? But it sounds like, be it shift or not, but it is more and more reflective about what we're seeing, right? And I think you're right. It is imperative that we find and explore ways that we can support these setups, because one of the biggest concerns, at least on the employer side, is like, man, why are my associates leaving? Why is there so much attrition, right?
Yep.
Like, you can't just throw people more bonus pay, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Money only goes so far if that's not the value, the priority value that people have, right? And of course, money is important. It never won't be important, especially this day and age when you do need two people to work to afford, a comfortable lifestyle, right? And I think it's, I see it in terms of the long term, right? You can, if you keep your employees happy, they can produce for you and make a lot of money for you over a 20, 30, 40 year period, right? And all you have to do is to have a little sacrifice of maybe 5 to 10 years where you let them work less and maybe produce a little less for your company, but they're happy because they're able to have kids or to spend time with their kids during those key formative years when they're young. And in return you get a lot of loyalty, you get a lot of return, right? So I think, and I understand, from a business perspective, you can't think that long term, right? And you have immediate needs, but I think there's a compromise here where if you can afford some true balance, and make people feel like they don't have to choose between work or family, and then you won't get to these situations where you're facing attrition or employees who don't want to join your company, or they jump to other companies who might offer better supposed work-life balance.
I think it's really interesting, right? Because when you have that, I think both parties, right, are set up and set up for success, right? It's I do agree that we're kind of set up in a place that's so numbers and economy and capitalist driven. I get it. You and I were on the billable clock, right? We get it, right? At the same time, I think there's so many things that we're seeing now with rise in mental health in adolescents and children, health, right? You're seeing a lot of news and stories about young men and boys and that aspect. Does that ever cross your mind? Like, I mean, you have a son. Like, are you thinking about that? And
for sure.
And like curious to get your perspective, right?
It's in a sense, it's it feels like it's sort of a scarier world than what we grew up in when us millennials were young, right? And again, obviously as a parent, you're more aware of things that you weren't aware of as a kid. I'm sure my parents had similar concerns. But we are also in an age where there's so much new technology that our parents just simply never had to deal with, right? Like things like cyberbullying or stalking or misinformation, right? Like things that can completely get out of hand with no real oversight or accountability. And in terms of raising a son, raising a man in this world, how do you sort of avoid the pitfalls of the current culture and ways of thinking that that are to put it bluntly pretty toxic?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's the big question, right? Because, I mean, you and I are quite plugged into what's happening around us. The technology space, you and I are quite plugged into the society level. There's also the rise in, of course, we're all talking about AI here and there. This might be the first time I bring up AI in a podcast, actually, for this. But I think that is a real thing, though, right? Like, you're seeing, let's call it, even like AI-generated porn. Like, that's not even a concept. But that is happening where you take a photo of a classmate, you funnel it through, and boom, right? And so these are just
scary,
interesting challenges that we would have never thought about or even imagined, right?
And I think it comes down to the core values of being a good role model for your child, especially for your son, right? And it's I wouldn't say it's something that I do deliberately or consciously. I don't think any of us really do, but just the saying goes, like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I'm trying to raise my son in a way where he is respectful to everyone. He is cognizant of the privilege that he has. He's cognizant of challenges that other people have, people who might be different from him, and how can he treat them with the right amount of respect. And make space for them as well, right? And that's something that I think, again, as millennials, I would say, yes, parenting for sure, but we're at the forefront of a lot of ways of thinking that are different from previous generations.
Yeah.
Both because we have to, and also because we've sort of learned from our parents and sort of like what not to do and what we should be doing to emulate them. Right. I think with every successive generation, there's always, or hopefully there's always, improvement and some sort of progress in the right direction. And now we're sort of at a I guess a path where you could go with like unlimited potential, which is uncharted because of technology,
right.
Or do you sort of stick to your core values and say like how can we use these new things to help us, but without distracting us from what's truly important.
I mean, the pushback that sometimes we might get is like, oh, are we overthinking it, right? Maybe it's not that bad, right? Are we over conceptualizing it? But I don't know. How would you approach that? How would you counter that?
I mean, the question of like, are you overthinking it? Like, what is the end goal, right? Like,
right.
I would say in terms of parenting, I have heard people who are from previous generations say, oh, like you're way too concerned about X and Y. Why like this was never a problem when we were raising you, kind of thing, right? And sure, I mean, I think on one hand, like they've probably forgotten the day-to-day challenges, but the other thing is, I mean, I'm not saying I'm like a helicopter parent, or I don't see myself as one. I'm not trying to be overly anxious or concerned, but I just want to be more involved, right? I do want to know what's going on with my child. I do want to know what makes him happy, what doesn't make him happy, right? And when he's having challenges, like how he's feeling, I want him to learn to express himself emotionally. Actually, I would say emotional regulation and emotional, how do you say, like for ways for you to express yourself, to like how you're feeling and communicating that, like that is very important. I find that to be a big part of the like issues surrounding men and males in general, and with the problems that we currently have in society, is because they're not able to regulate their emotions. They're not able to communicate those things, like things that they need and things that they're having challenges with.
I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot to that, actually, Kevin. Because like, as I'm thinking about it as you're speaking, right? This emotional regulation piece, the role model piece, the values piece, like, I'm just gonna speak out of my heart because this just comes to mind. A couple of months ago, the listeners know from Vancouver, but you've probably heard on the news, right? There's this horrific tragedy in Vancouver, Lapu Lapu, a festival. Young man drove through, a block of this festival goers.
Yeah.
It was actually a couple of blocks from my house.
Oh, geez.
Like it just hit so home. I was actually about to go, and my daughter was wailing, and I'm like, she must have knew something. So I'm like, hey, we'll just stay home and watch whatever, right? But as I was going through the backstory of the perpetrator, right? Like, divorced family, right? Didn't really have a connection to his father, right? And mother, there's a lot of elements in there that I feel like you cannot help but think that if there was some kind of role model, somewhere to kind of guide in the early stages, it doesn't necessarily be like your father. It could be like an uncle or like big brother, whatever it is. But someone who just starts from that psychological core, right? And that's kind of where more and more you just hear these tragic stories of shootings and like even the U.S. It's horrific. Oftentimes it's from this. And it's from this. And so you're right, because as we have this technology bringing us, bifurcating society in a way, I think it's important that we actually are even more hyper mindful.
Yeah. I think right? it's a real and still growing threat now of radicalization among young males, right? And enabled because of technology and the internet and the and ways that they can quickly fall into this rabbit hole. I mean, if you, I don't know if you've ever done this, but you ever create like a new Google account, a fresh one, right? And you go on YouTube, and within like 3 clicks of a reel or a video or something, you're already getting like the manosphere clips.
Oh yeah,
right? And it's like this is a fresh Google account. Like if, there's no real identifying feature to say that you're a male using the account, and yet like you get pushed into this sort of content immediately. So for kids who don't, like, I would say, like, for us millennials who've grown up with the internet, and have probably seen the worst of the internet before there was more sort of a censorship or regulation, like, we know how to navigate those things, right? And I would hope that for a lot of us at this age now in our 30s, that we know how to see the pitfalls of it. But there are a lot of people, both old and young, who don't have that sort of training. And they either learn the hard way and they fall into this rabbit hole and they try and figure out a way to climb out, or they keep going further and further. And I don't know how for young kids today, especially young boys, you know, if they see that stuff on the internet and they think that's normal, right? Because some algorithm told them to watch this and it sounds cool. There's like sound effects or whatever, and like dunking on someone, and like they, you know,
Yeah.
like it's really messed up, and like there's nothing that anyone is really doing anything about it or can really do it at this point.
I just came up with this visual as you're speaking about like just like this pit that you're just like falling deeper and deeper into, because if you look back on, you know, millennials as we encountered media, it was on TV, right? Like you just flip the channel, right?
Yeah.
But here's like, oh, you're watching it for another 5 seconds. I'm going to give you more of this and more.
Yeah,
of this.
exactly. Right.
Right. It's a rapid.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle where
it's a rapid cycle, and so maybe this is a really fun conversation for me, Kevin, because I don't get to a chance to kind of riff on this a little bit on leveraging this where we're going here. Where do you see the pros and cons of AI and children's health with respect to technology, and just like what comes to mind when you're like, you know, seeing this, right? We kind of talked about algorithms, but I want to dive like 2 or 3 steps deeper in. Like, what are you seeing? Yeah.
I mean, I'd say for me personally, I see more cons than pros. The pros, of course, are, you know, you can do things more efficiently. You can have more breakthroughs, you know, technologically, scientifically, academically, corporately, business focused wise. But at the same time, my concern is, are we sort of allowing our future generations to have the fundamental skills to get to that level? So just, you know, using work as an example, right? Like, you know, you and I both grew up in an environment in law where we had to be, you know, doing signature pages for a while, you know, which seemed completely meaningless, and it was in a sense. But then, you know, you sort of do that enough times, and then and then someone gives you something a little more, right? And they're like, okay, you know, make these revisions that I've written up into the Word document. And so you do that, and you don't really know what's going on still, but then you get used to doing that, and you kind of slowly zoom out as you get more and more experience, and then finally you're at the point where you're like, oh, I actually understand what's going on here. I understand why we're making these changes, or why, you know, this random entity needs to be on the signature block, right, rather than like the main entity. Why is there a nominee, for example? That sort of thing, right? Yeah. And I'm worried that with AI, we're sort of leapfrogging those fundamental steps, right? It's almost like, you know, having a calculator to help you calculate these complex formulas and equations, but if you don't know how to do 1 + 1 because that was leapfrog for you, then how are you going to be able to understand advanced calculus? And you know, I'm sure our boomer parents had the same argument when they brought in the calculator, but I feel like, you know, this sort of technology growth is exponential, right? Like, this is beyond just a simple calculator. This is doing things that it's logicking. It's doing things that are sort of are trying to replace human opinions and you know, human thought patterns. So, you know, for me as a parent, how do I ensure that my child still thinks about like how to do things rather than just simply relying on Google or Siri or whoever to do it for them? And you know, my child is still young. He's not at the point yet where, you know, he's not actually in school yet. He's in daycare. But in like, you know, they're teaching him skills, and we're trying to keep screens and other technology out of his hands as much as possible. We know it's inevitable for him to one day have a cell phone or iPad, but for now we're trying to focus on, you know, sort of the basics, right? Like getting him to try and play in an analog way, try and learn things in a more analog way, so that hopefully he's better equipped to deal with the digital world and still come up with analog solutions if it needs to, you know, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, and there's this notion of just that hard work, like that hard piece is actually the growth piece, right? And if we shortcut that, there's some downstream repercussions, right? And I think part of it, as I'm riffing with you on a little bit, right? When we talk about uses of AI to kind of shortcut a lot of these thought processes, whether it's things like, I don't know, just really that deep work aspect of it. It could be, I don't know, I feel like there's I think there's something nebulous that we haven't really looked into, and I'm sure it'll start clearing out a little bit, but it's not just kind of affecting boys, right? I think it's girls as well too. Like it's the youth, right? What does that look like? And I also don't want to be like, oh, back in the old days we walked through snow, right?
Yeah. I think the difference is that like I don't want future generations to go through the same challenges that we went through, right? Like I would like to have a world or create a world where the difficult, the bad stuff is all taken care of, right? That we've sort of paved the way for future generations to do things easier. But easier doesn't necessarily mean taking shortcuts or not understanding the fundamental reason why something is done, right? And so, again, in the work context, like I don't necessarily want my summer student to be doing signature pages, right? And so, I'll try and involve them in the actual work as well. But it's also important for them to understand why they're doing signature pages, because it's like attention to detail, or like trying to figure out, I don't know, formatting or whatever, right? Like things that again like are sort of silly in a sense, but also fundamental. You can't really progress to the next step without understanding the really basic stuff, right? And that the goal is that eventually we give them more and more information and challenges so that they rise to that level and fully understand how they got there.
If I could and I absolutely agree. If I could tie back to what you said earlier about emotional regulation and that aspect, because I don't know if you're going through this right now. I'm struggling with it right now, where now that my daughter knows how to say no and all these aspects, I'm like, what is going on?
It's worse than no, right? It's like, they really like stab your heart and it twists the knife in a way that you can,
right? Yeah. Or like temper tantrums, or like just suddenly. I think it's only 2 weeks ago actually. We went on a trip to California together as a family, and just suddenly all these like behaviors started coming out. I'm like, whoa! It's just like every chapter of fatherhood, it's like a new challenge, right? I don't know if you're encountering that.
Yeah. So it's it's funny. I think back to my childhood, right? And I would say like I love both of my parents, and I think they were both really great parents to me. But also in very different ways, right? Like my dad was always like the cool, fun one that I played with and I loved playing with. And I would say my mom was the one who I turned to for emotional support, right? And even to this day, I'm sure a lot of listeners would agree that, chats with your dad versus chats with your mom, like especially as a son, are so different. Like dad is usually more like tech support, or it's like, hey, I need this, right? It's very like goal oriented, in that moment. Whereas for chatting with your mom is a lot of like what's going on in your life, how are you doing, kind of thing, and more of like the emotional talk, right? And I like what I'm trying to do is to have my son one day say like I can go to my mom or my dad equally whenever I need emotional support, right? And it's harder than it sounds. Like even for me, like I do find myself veering more towards like the play focused sort of parenting, right? Like my son loves spending time with me and we have a ton of fun together, but am I really asking him about his day, or like asking him how he feels and really talking to him about it, and showing him how I feel too, right? That whether I'm happy or I'm upset, right? And like explaining that to him, being like, daddy's upset, daddy had a bad day at work today and he's not really really in the mood to play, for example, because of whatever happened, right? And even just like modeling that is still more of a challenge for me than it probably is for my wife.
You kind of touched upon something about modeling, and it just brings back a memory. So the difference between my wife and I is when I was growing up, both my parents like kept a lot of their emotions like quiet, right? And so they never really spoke up about it. Right? And it's just like, so I started to adopt that. But whereas in my wife's, her parents' relationships, like they're very open. Like if there's anything going on, it's just like right up front, right? And so I found it to be really refreshing when we were dating, right? Because I know exactly what she's thinking. Like there's no hidden agenda. She'll tell you exactly, right? And similarly, it's something that I'm trying to evolve and learn as well too, right? It's like where if something is wrong, let's like pinpoint it right away or speak about it in the early stages. And so part of that is I'm going through my own spiritual, like emotional journey as well too, such that, as my daughter sees the both of us, right? Because there is a modeling, because I'm modeling what I'm doing from the way I was raised and vice versa.
Yeah, and then you don't really know any different too,
right?
And until you meet your spouse and you see that, oh, like they actually, you can do something a different way, right? And then and you kind of like, you try and blend the best of both methods, right? And also understand like maybe we shouldn't do these things, or you talk it out, right? Like trying to understand like why do you do things this way, and not this other way. I also wonder, I have a question for you.
Please, yeah.
Being a lawyer, right? Do you find that sometimes you might be also too results oriented or solution focused, right? Where sometimes people they don't necessarily need solutions or answers to their problems or life problems, right? Sometimes they just want someone to vent to and just someone to listen. And I find that for me, it is a blind spot for me, being both a man and a lawyer, that when I hear someone I care about telling me about a problem, my first instinct is to propose, like, you have 3 options, right? And here's the
high risk, medium risk,
exactly the risk factor for each, right? And the likelihood of success.
Here's my bill.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And like I have a lot of friends who might say, well, that's not what I need in the moment, right? Like, maybe sure at some point when I'm ready to decide on what the next step should be, yes, like that'll be a very helpful conversation. But it's like, for now, I just want you to listen to me vent, right? And sometimes with my own spouse, it can be the same thing. Even though she's a lawyer as well, and she tends to be very results oriented, like sometimes she just wants to vent about something, and there are times when I just want to vent about something, and I just want someone to listen. So I think that's the other thing with kids, right? Like you sort of get caught up in this day-to-day, like just trying to survive, right? Oh, we got to do daycare pickups and drop-offs. We got to put food on the dinner table by like 5:30 p.m. so that they can go do bedtime by like 7 p.m. and be in bed by 8 p.m., be asleep by 8:15, whatever it is, right? And you're on this schedule all the time. You just go. And sometimes I've realized, like, you just, even for us and for myself, you don't really step back and think about, okay, well, what is my son actually feeling now, right? Yes, maybe he's throwing a tantrum and it's really annoying and it's like causing a delay in our proposed schedule here, but like why is he upset, right? What is he upset about? And not to say that like every tantrum, especially for a 3-year-old, is definitely not. But there's no denying that this is how they're feeling, regardless of whether it's justified or not. This is how they're feeling, and what am I doing to give them that space to know that it's okay to feel things, but also like challenge them enough that they have to figure out a way to stop being so angry that they can't go to the park at 7 p.m. right? And that they learn that sort of emotional regulation. They learn to cope with things and accept things or find solutions to calm them down.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good question, right? Because I feel like sometimes our children are placed here for us to evolve as humans, right?
Yeah.
Because we could have, absolutely, right? Back to your earlier question, problems, yeah, absolutely. Like, hey, medium, slow, here's the 3 options, right? And I think I learned the hard way with my ex. I think luckily, I guess she trained me well for my current wife, right? But she slapped me in the face early. It's like, okay, here, I got coached early on, right? But definitely, right? And it was like, that was my mindset, right? Yeah. Like, and that was a big shift in who I was. And okay, how do I move into, I'm still not perfect at this, by the way, at all.
And no one is. It's always a continual path of improvement, right? And I feel like you can never really be perfect.
No,
I mean if you think that you're perfect, then that means you're not doing enough to improve yourself. Right?
Oh, there's like a blind spot.
Yeah, there is, and I'm sure in the future, our kids will one day look back and be like, wow, I can't believe our parents were like that and that they were so backwards in that sense, right? And that's okay. Like it's sort of what we've done to past generations, so it makes sense that it would happen to us one day. But again, it's like, hopefully there is continual improvement in the right direction, and that my kids are not making the same mistakes that my wife and I might be making as millennial parents now.
This could be a controversial question, but I was going to ask it anyways. What is something that you and your spouse, who I know, disagree on, and how have you guys? Because I'm curious to know what this, and I'm happy to share the ones that my wife and I disagree on too. But or there's like a pattern that's maybe in the past that's come up in the last 3.5 years.
You mean in terms of parenting?
I
would say
parenting. Yeah.
I think like, and
I'm not fully aligned on. Let's use that word.
I think it's maybe more about escalation, right? Like when do you escalate and fight fire with fire with your child who's having a tantrum or not behaving the way you want them to, versus taking the, I don't want to say softer approach, but taking the less aggressive, like the non-escalation approach of like trying to understand where they're coming from, trying to reason with them. And that's something that, I'd say for my wife and I, we sort of like take turns losing our steam sometimes, right? You know how it is. Sometimes you just need your spouse to step in because you're like, okay, I'm going to lose my cool here, and I'm just going to start yelling at him, which is not going to be productive, right? And so that's something that we're still sort of struggling with as he is getting smarter and evolving and like, again, like learning to say things and do things that are, I guess, that can really hurt, right?
Yeah.
And how do you avoid taking that personally, right? So I don't know. I know this is sort of I guess, like not a sort of a bland answer to your controversial question, but I'd say if say you were to escalate it, right? It's like one thing, for example, that might have been done to us when we were young would be corporal punishment. Yeah, corporal punishment, right? And people today don't hit their kids.
No. Yeah.
And we don't hit our kid either. But I honestly would say like there are probably times when a child deserves a spanking or a little, like a slap on the wrist. Like obviously nothing like truly permanently damaging them, but I do wonder in theory if there was some logic to that sort of corporal punishment, the grandma with the cane kind of approach, right? And I don't know. And again, like I wasn't hit as a child, and so I don't really know what it's like to be hit, and I don't actually know if it's successful or not. But I wonder if it's if we as millennials are maybe, I don't know, I don't say too soft, but we're not considering approaches like old school approaches that may have been successful in the past for a reason, because we've sort of written it off as not being acceptable.
It's interesting, like where so I was hit as a kid a lot, like,
and would you say it's, in hindsight, is it good or not?
It actually caused like a really rift in my relationship with my dad. It actually wasn't until right after like I graduated college we started to amend things. It wasn't during law school we started to amend things. And then what's the funny thing is that so my dad passed of cancer, right? Like shortly after my daughter was born, but I got a chance to spend time with him, for a good 1 to 2 months in Toronto. He's in Toronto, right? Before my daughter was born, so I was here working remotely. And one of the things he did say to me right before, like during those precious times together, he actually made me promise, like, hey, he actually apologized. Hey, I'm so sorry I hit you. He's been carrying that burden for a while. He actually didn't hit my brother at all. Yeah, for some reason. It was like a social experiment. I don't know, right? Let's see what happens. He turned out fine.
And did your brother have a much closer relationship with your dad?
No. He still it was a bit of rip because I think my parents separated when he was young enough. But one of the things he, in his dying days, I already forgave him, right? But he apologized. But he also made me promise, like, don't carry on the trauma. Like he directly said, "Hey, my dad did this to me. It's not to excuse it."
Right.
And I'm sure the same thing happened. He's like, "I don't want you to
be better. Yeah.
Be better. I want you to cut this off now."
Yeah.
Because he could see that it could perpetuate, right? And so
yeah.
I think it's a good question, right? And that's kind of why I ask about, especially during this, you and I are tracking a similar phase, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, how do we navigate it?
and like, it's you try and take advice from your parents too, and because they've actually gone through it, right? But at the same time, I feel there's also a lot of some would say arrogance for our generation, that we think that the old school way of parenting isn't the right way, or that could be done better. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't, right? So perhaps for corporal punishment, like definitely, like that's the better way is to not do it, right? But then are there other things, are we being overly anxious or concerned, or just like letting kids be kids kind of thing, or are we thinking too much about sort of the pitfalls and the challenges? I again, it's like, I don't think there's a real answer that we'll ever know until we get to the ripe old age of, being a grandparent, and then we will share our opinions from the early 2000s or whatever, and they'll say, okay, Grandpa, time to go back to your VR headset.
I don't know. It's funny how that cycle of life works. If I could end off on the last question here, we talked about we're tracking a very similar phase. I mean, what are you excited about in this next chapter of fatherhood for you?
I would say definitely the age of exploration Where even when my son was very young, I told my wife that I can't wait for the day when our son just keeps asking why. Right? And he's fully in this phase. He's been in this phase for like at least a year now, and he still is.
Yeah.
And I find it really fascinating to relearn the world that we live in from his perspective, and to a lot of times, like, the question why is not simple. It's like, well, it's like, for example, it's like, okay, you gotta go to school. I gotta drop you off because I have to go to work. Well, why? Right? Or like, oh, like I gotta work late today, so I can't pick you up from school. Well, why? Right? And then you really think about it, like, well, you first have to explain in a way that they can understand and hopefully accept. But also sometimes maybe it makes you question, well, like, why am I working so late? Right? What am I doing it for? Is it worth always working so late and missing out on after school pickups, or like the chance to ride a bike with him, or in the future maybe miss out on his like hockey practice or violin practice or whatever it is, right? Like, is it worth it? And it really makes you think about, like, why do we do the things that we do? Is it for a good cause? Is it to advance a goal of ours, right? Sometimes it is justifiable. If say you're working really hard at your job because you want a promotion, or you want more money or something, or something, right? Something that's tangible within your reach, then it is worth it, right? And sometimes the answer is, well, I have to work late because I'm trying to accomplish this.
Yep.
And yes, it's going to be tough. I'm going to really miss you. I know you're going to really miss me, but it'll be worth it, right? Because at the end, like, I'm doing this for myself. And it's also important for our son to recognize that both mommy and daddy work hard independently of him, right? And that we have goals that are independent of him. We have interests and needs and wants that are independent of him. And that, yes, we love him very much, and we would love nothing more than to spend every waking moment with him, in a sense. But also there's a part of us which is like, we're very focused on our careers, and we do really want to get to where we are, and we're not going to apologize for that. And I don't think we should feel bad for it, because one day he's going to go through the same thing, right? So how do you strike that balance? And that's something that we're still going through, but I think I'd say for the most part we're doing a pretty good job. Like, again, a child is never going to understand why a parent has to work late and can't play with them.
Yeah.
But you sort of, it's half of like this is sort of the reality that he has to accept, and also half of like, well, like let's talk through it, right? And like try and put it in a way that he might be able to resonate with, right? It's like, oh, he likes playing with this toy. Well, why does he do it, right? And what is the end goal? Like, why are you learning to ride a bike? Why do you want to go outside and play? That kind of thing, right? And there's always a goal, and maybe if you can make it so that it's like, well, this is the goal you're trying to achieve, and this is the goal that I'm trying to achieve, and there's something similar. But for the most part, I'd say no. Like, a 3-year-old is not going to understand it; they don't care. But hopefully, it's more of the training for yourself that you can sort of, explain to, not just to your child, but to yourself why you're doing something, and to really make sure that whatever you're doing, whatever you're saying, whatever you're thinking, it has to be worth it.
And it has to resonate with you, right? Sometimes it's kind of good to be like, oh yeah, why am I doing this? Right? It's like, am I still doing this for the right reasons? Right?
Yeah.
And if I can't explain it in a way that feels true to who I am, to my own son, then like that's like another reflection point. That's actually really powerful, Kevin.
And kids always know, right? Like, they always know if you're being honest.
Yeah.
They always know if you're hiding something from them. They just have this sixth sense.
Yes.
And like they're like the ultimate lawyers. Like, any loophole, anything that you hold up from them, they will exploit, and they will attack you on it. So.
Well, I can't wait for your son to listen to this podcast, and you'll
one day, yeah, 20 years from now.
Well, Kevin, hey, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you, for being who you are, and kind of like speaking your voice, and being such a personal guy, and being open to this and jumping in. I've been a big fan of yours, and we don't get to live in the same city, or else I'd bug you even more. So
yeah, well,
this is a good excuse for me.
Thank you for giving regular dudes like myself a chance to come on the podcast.
No, we got to alternate a little bit. This is awesome. But we'll close it out with a debrief after this. But hey, thank you so much, man.
You as well, Steven. Thanks so much.
All right, that was a wrap. That was such a fun conversation with my dear friend Kevin. It's such a nice way to kind of riff on these big ideas about technology, about AI, about what he's thinking when it comes to being a millennial dad. I think he captures it so succinctly in the first response, because it is different. There are really no role models, and I'm just so grateful to you, Kevin, for being so open, for being so upfront, and just really riffing on this with me, because hey, we're all trying to figure it out. And so with that, thank you all so much for listening in. But if you liked it, share it with a friend, with a colleague. Love to get your thoughts. Like, what do you think it means to be a millennial dad nowadays? What are your thoughts on AI and how it might affect our children's health and beyond? And so love to kind of like explore this idea a little further, because I think it's something that we haven't really thought about. I think we talked about AI when it comes to work settings, but what about in terms of like, education, but more specifically, the health of our children? And so with that, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, 2-1car.com. A huge thanks to the team behind the scenes for making this all work. Again, to Baron, to Trixie, to Jess, you guys are the best. And to everybody else, I appreciate you. Have a great day, and we'll chat again soon. Cheers. Bye.